Let's begin with a brief introduction to our speakers, the team behind New Hampshire Agrarian Commons, and learn a little bit more about what they do and how they fit into the Agrarian Trust Network. New Hampshire Agrarian Commons is working with local farmers to preserve the agrarian landscape while making organic agriculture a viable profession for the next generation of young, diverse farmers. Through holding, preserving, and giving farmers equitable access and secure tenure to whole farms through 99-year leases, we can collectively help ensure equitable tenure and support for the next generation of farmers focused on regenerative, diversified food production and sustaining community-centered farms. 3 founding farms of the region's commons are Brookford Farm, Monadnock Community Farm, and Vernon Family Farm. Over the course of the next 3 years, these founding farms will each be transferred into the New Hampshire Agrarian Commons. The Commons is coming about with support, donations, investment, and engagement from donors and the local community. Agrarian Trust is a single national 501(c) land trust with multiple local 501(c)(2) community land commons across the United States, with a mission to support land access for the next generation of farmers. Now let's hear from the team behind New Hampshire Agrarian Commons. Ian McSweeney is a board member and treasurer of New Hampshire Agrarian Commons and the director of Agrarian Trust. Ian's career and his life work has been focused on the human connection to soil and food. He first worked as a social worker focused on developing and operationalizing outdoor experience-based education programs and later sought more direct work with the connections to soil and food in real estate by founding a brokerage and consulting company to focus on prioritizing conservation, agriculture, and community within typical land development. Most recently, he served as executive director of the Russell Foundation, a private foundation focused on assisting landowners and farmers through customized approaches to farmland ownership, conservation, management, and stewardship. During his tenure, the Russell Foundation worked with 65 land conservation groups, 40 townships, and local, state, and federal partners to assist 60 farms, complete 28 lease and/or management agreements, and complete more than 100 farmland-focused projects protecting over 12,000 acres and raising over $16 million, all aimed toward providing benefit to farmland, farmers, communities, and the local agrarian economy. Ian is a board member and treasurer for the New Hampshire Agrarian Commons. Jamie Bemis is a board member and secretary for New Hampshire Agrarian Commons. Jamie is an energy efficiency and renewable energy consultant with over 10 years of experience working on sustainability projects in the public, private, and academic sectors. Her passion for sustainability has led her to become more involved in local food efforts and to explore issues faced by small farms. She holds a BS in Mechanical Engineering from the University of New Hampshire and a Master's in City Planning from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Jamie is a board member and serves as a secretary for the New Hampshire Agrarian Commons and is a member of the Osmond Sargent Land Preservation Trust, the New Hampshire Rivers Council, and the Permaculture Association of the Northeast. Steve Normanton is a board member and leasee farmer of New Hampshire Agrarian Commons. Steve has been farming since the age of 8 and brings a lifetime of farming experience to Normanton Farms, learning from a young age how to steward 16,000 acres of African game land in South Africa, and working as a farm manager for a 34,000-acre dairy, pig, cattle, and crop farm before moving to the United States to start his own cattle farm on leased land. Steve's commitment to regenerative practices on the land has led him to being recognized as a soil health champion by the National Association of Conservation Districts, and in 2014 he was awarded Farmer Mentor of the Year for the Northeast Organic Farmers Association. Steve runs Normanton Farms, a pastured chicken, pastured pork, and 100% grass-fed beef farm, producing 50 beef cows, 30,000 broiler chickens, and up to 100 hogs each year, directly supporting 130 local families and strengthening community and regional food systems. Amy Manzelli is the president of the board and a board member for New Hampshire Agrarian Commons. Amy is part owner of BCM Environmental and Land Law, PLLC, where she practices environmental conservation and land law across New Hampshire and Maine. Amy frequently works with farmers to secure their farmland and ensure they can continue to provide food to their local communities. For example, actively representing the New Hampshire Agrarian Commons as they work to provide and steward affordable farmland access to the next generation of farmers. She earned a BA in Spanish with a minor in biology and a BS in environmental conservation in 1998 from the University of New Hampshire, where she is now a distinguished alumna. She earned her JD in 2005. Let's dive in to a presentation from Ian McSweeney about New Hampshire Agrarian Commons.
We also know, here we value local agriculture in New Hampshire and are also aware that we get very little of our food locally from New Hampshire or from the region. That goals set forth for a regional food system and food provided require a lot of land base held in agriculture that presently isn't. And, we all know that we're very reliant on other parts of the country and other parts of the world for our food. And the reality is depicted here, the West, as we all know, is also on fire, continuously more and more so. And it creates risk and loss and kind of fractures in our food system that really require us to relocalize and regionalize in many ways. And to do that, we need to hold the land. And for us in New Hampshire and in northern New England, the cost of farmland is significantly higher than farm incomes. And that's not unique to New Hampshire. Across the country, farm incomes continue to decrease, as the center map shows. And the cost of real estate farmland real estate continues to appreciate in a long trend. So that's even more extreme here in New Hampshire. But really the need to hold land in this agrarian common structure is important. And for us in New Hampshire, just in closing on this, is we have in New Hampshire and New England a very long history of founding the conservation land trust movement and having many early pioneers in the community land trust movement. And what the agrarian commons model is multiple local community land trusts focused on agricultural land. So it's really taking from two long-standing kind of cultural pieces of work and impact created by organizations locally and across the country, and evolving them into an agricultural focused community land trust structure. So I will stop there and pass off to Steve to share some more on the farm, and then I'll come back and share a little more on the Agrarian Commons.
I just wanted to chime in real quick. This is Jamie. Steve, I think we were having a little bit of an issue with your audio previously. So if you could speak up, I'll let you know if we can hear you adequately. Otherwise, we'll have you call in.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear. Glad we got that fixed. Thanks.
Okay, sorry that you get such a close-up. I'm on my phone, so you get a close-up of my forehead probably. Folks, I'm Steve Normanton, as I said a little earlier. I've been farming on this piece of land since 2009. I'm originally from South Africa and grew up farming and was in a farming community there. And when I came to the United States and got married, I was looking for farmland, and it's a scarce commodity in this neck of the woods. So I was able to, through various connections, cobble some land together and start my farming operation way back in 2004. And I lived in a community land trust, housing community land trust. And they approached me in 2009 and said, we have this farmland available and no farmer to farm it. Are you interested in taking it over? And that was such a great opportunity. We farm livestock, although we've done some vegetables so on and so forth. But our main focus has been on regenerating soil health through various practices. And one of those, there are many practices that we can use for that. But we use livestock, their manure and so on and so forth to enrich the soil, mixed with cover cropping and, just various different tactics that I've learned over the years from different philosophies on building soil. And, so that's always been our main focus, that we get some great beef off of it, that we produce excellent chicken and pork off the land. The main focus has been on putting back into the land. And this has always been really important to me because I'm always thinking about the person that's coming after me. So joining the Agrarian Commons, the opportunity arose last year when I had a thought that I may be transitioning out of the Litchfield area and moving somewhere else. And, the thought of all this hard work that I'd put in to start rebuilding the land and so on and so forth, we wanted, that kind of stewardship mentality to continue. And the land trust that owned the land at that stage didn't have any expertise or support. And knowing Ian over the years, I had a conversation with him and with the land, together with the land trust, we've decided to put this farm into the commons. And that's really great because we can be assured that, even though people might not farm with cows here or with chickens or whatever I was doing, that this land will be continued to be stewarded in a responsible way that leaves something for the next generation. It's really important that the concept of land ownership is an interesting one to me, because if you look at a lot of native people from around the world, whether it's Bushmen or Native Americans, they always lived in conjunction with the land and understood that the land was there to provide bounty for them, but there was no physical ownership or title or deed. And their responsibility was to steward that land for the next generation to ensure the survival of their cultures and their civilizations. So, just that thought that we have to change things in a way, not only with the thought process of thinking about the next generation or thinking about even 10 generations from now and what we leave them. What we do today has an impact 10, 20, 50 years down the line. And so just working the land like this and hoping to leave it in a better condition than I found it has always been one of my missions, and it aligns with what the Agrarian Commons and the Agrarian Trust mission is. I also wanted to mention, recently we've had a pandemic, and it's really important when crises like that hit, it really becomes apparent all the weak links we have in our food production system in this country. And then especially when you get into New Hampshire, where, there isn't a big focus on agriculture, that, people need to start paying attention to the fact that, we've got 2 or 3 or maybe 5 days supply of food that this state can provide in any crisis. And then we bankrupt and we rely on other states throughout the country or other countries from overseas to provide us with stuff. And I think that just recently as well, there's a hack on a meat producing plant, and all of a sudden there's this concern that there's not going to be enough beef around because of this hack on the on the plant. And once again, you know, small local, small medium sized farms are the real backbone of this country. That's what built this country, and we need to conserve those and put them into use with good stewardship practices. And it's amazing what you can produce. This farm produces family meat for families. I think we have about 180 families that buy product from us, and that support the farm, and that feels great. It feels great that there are 180 people or 180 families that are interested in what I do and where their food comes from. So I don't know if I've covered everything that I want to cover, but if anybody has questions, um, feel free to ask them a little later on.
Thanks, Steve. And yeah, sorry to move through quick, but we're trying to kind of share a fair amount of information and leave time at the end for questions. So yeah, Steve shared some on his farm. Just to give you a little more detail on the other farms, Brookford Farm and Vernon Family Farm, and Steve's as well. As you can see, these on the map in the red area, this is also a map by American Farmland Trust, just zoomed down to the state that indicates kind of areas with farmland at greatest loss for development. So as you can see, these farms are, you know, kind of surrounding the urban areas of New Hampshire and are an area of great land loss for development, great increase in farmland prices that you know, make it unaffordable and uneconomical for farmers in many ways. And really these farms, as Steve was indicating, the 180 families he feeds, each of these farms has a unique story. Each of these farms is, by New Hampshire standards, kind of mid to larger size, regenerative organic farms that have a diversified market, from local on-farm stores to kind of regional retail wholesale accounts, so that they're feeding a region, they're holding significant land. This Brookford land, 620 acres just north of Concord, New Hampshire, along the Merrimack River, as Normanton Farm is south of Manchester on the Merrimack. The two farms together have close to 4 miles of frontage on the Merrimack River itself and are, you know, really centrally located. Vernon Family Farm in Newfields, closer to the seacoast area, right along 101. Again, similar markets as described. They have a large community engagement with events and activities, and kind of the sales through farm store and other farm meals on site. You know, but each one of these farms has a kind of really unique story and is kind of an example of a a regenerative farm at scale that has potential to be, or is living into, kind of a financially viable model, with the exception of kind of the pressures of land, capital, operations, everything else Steve could tell you about. And really, you know, through this agrarian commons model, bringing the land into this ownership structure allows long-term affordable security and equity building components for landowners, the farmers, while they're able to build their business. So it eliminates some of that financial burden, allowing them the security needed to be on the farm. In addition to that, the Agrarian Commons model, as well as holding land, kind of acquiring land into ownership in the commons and conveying lease out of land, also feels it's critically important to invest in land. Whether it's depleted or degraded soils or ecosystem, or lack of farm infrastructure needed, or in New Hampshire's case, the high cost of property tax and the high cost of energy are significant obstacles for farms as well. So thinking about investment in regenerative energy production on farm is critical for New Hampshire. But each one of the farms that Agrarian Trust and Agrarian Commons works with is considered of what additional investments are needed to bring health to the soil and ecosystem and bring viability to the farm, knowing that the model of putting the ownership of land and the investment to regenerate soils and capitalize infrastructure and business all on the farm's back leads to 37 mid-sized farms a day closing across this country. So how can a nonprofit structure through this commons, how can that support the ownership and stewardship management of the farm in a way that helps bring financial sustainability to farms? So, that is a very brief overview of the New Hampshire Commons farms and some of kind of the focus of the New Hampshire Agrarian Commons in kind of the mid to larger size regenerative organic food systems and farm production and viability. Each commons looks quite different across the country, and Agrarian Trust is involved in a variety of other work as well. So, as we're here to also talk about equity and land justice, central, we feel, to the Agrarian Commons model is land justice. The fact that over 98% of farmland is owned by white people, and over 80% of farm workers, farm employees, are people of color, is an unjust system. The fact that the majority of farmland is owned by non-farmers is an unjust system. And really the foundation of these systems are land ownership and land tenure. So we feel through this model, we can manifest land justice, both in the Agrarian Commons model, and an example of that would be in Maine with the Little Juba Agrarian Commons, where majority of the board is Somali Bantu community members. And that Agrarian Commons raised money, acquired a farm that now gives secure, affordable tenure to the Somali Bantu community and 220 farm families in the Auburn-Lewiston area to grow the food they need to sustain themselves when they, as first-generation Black Americans in Maine, the whitest state in the nation, face close to 60% food insecurity reality. So that type of land ownership, land tenure in an agrarian commons, we feel is manifesting land justice for that community there. We also feel that all our work is an open source resource. So, as we've developed this model, we've created kind of transparency in all the documents. Please look at Agrarian Commons sites. Each of the commons have details on their founding documents or links. We also have several toolkits that are recently published that are free and available to all. We also have a workshop series coming up with Northeast farmers of color around land ownership, land tenure models. We'll have an announcement coming out in the next few weeks of a workshop with Northeast farmers of color in July, and then we'll have several over the next year and a half. I'd also encourage many to look at U.S. Food Sovereignty Alliance and their member network and see who's involved with that. But it differs kind of locally, our work, and then there's kind of intersection nationally with different organizations. But ultimately, we feel that addressing land ownership and land tenure is our way to engage in equity. On to you, Amy.
All right. So can everybody hear me? Ian, can you hear me? Yeah. All right. Great. I did want to address the question I saw pop up in the chat. So the ownership and financial relationship is that the commons organizations, the state based organization, or some of the commons are actually, they don't even cover a whole state, they just cover a region of a state. The commons level organizations are the landowners, they're the landlords in a strictly legal sense. And then they lease the land to the farmers. But those leases are, the catchword here is equitable, but what that really means is extremely favorable for the farmer. They really, truly, in every sense of the word that we could, to the best of our ability, set those farmers up for long-term, regenerative, sustainable, viable farming. And there is a rent payment, but it's not your traditional, fair market value-based rent. It's more based on the financial sustainability of the farm and what are the financial and other important objectives of the farm. And it's based on the lease, and the leases are tailored for the farming situation. So that answers some of that question. And the toolkit is, like Ian mentioned, it sort of has everything under the sun. The point being, nobody should be doing what a lot of us have been doing over the past couple of years, which is a little bit of reinventing the wheel. The wheel has already been made and rolling, and people should be free to roll with that moving forward. So I did want to just talk a little bit about the centralized relationship as well. The way that this collaboration is set up is just so terrific. Agrarian Trust is a nationwide nonprofit. So they operate in most of the state, or not most of the states, many states in the nation. And they have centralized, useful stuff like website hosting and administrative staff and things of that nature. So each of the commons, and the New Hampshire Agrarian Commons does do this, can take advantage of some of those centralized resources. And that's a real key attribute about this innovative land stewardship model that we're rolling out that really distinguishes this from, a lot of folks have had visions similar to this, where you're setting up a structure to put the ownership and the control of this important community resource, this farmland, into the hands of the community. But it's, it's like an insular group, and it's kind of unsupported. And so this national level tethering is really important. And that's really what my job was to share today. So that's it. And now I'm going to hand it over to Jamie Bemis. Go ahead, Jamie.
Great, thank you, Amy. So I think, as everyone's probably heard, we've spent a lot of time over the past year getting our major organizational infrastructure and processes in place. It's been a ton of work, but we're making a lot of progress, and we're very, very excited. A year later, we're starting to think about next steps for our organization. And so one of the ways that we want to get folks from the public involved is through our membership. So I'm going to put in the chat here how you can learn how to become a member. So we have 3 classes of members for the New Hampshire Agrarian Commons. The first is our lessee members, so that's the farms and the farm employees. The second class of members is community members. So if you're a New Hampshire resident and you're excited about this model and you want to get involved, you can become a community member of the Agrarian Commons. And then there's also a general or support member. So if you're not a New Hampshire resident, but you're still passionate about what we're doing here in New Hampshire, particularly if you have a skill set you'd like to contribute or professional services that you can offer. An example of that might be legal work or accounting services, fundraising, educational support, so on and so forth. You can become a general member as well. The one thing I wanted to note, as I think Amy and Ian already touched on, is there are a number of agrarian commons in other states as well. So if you do not live in New Hampshire, but say you're in Vermont or you're in Maine, there are local agrarian commons in those states as well. So just to be aware, something to consider. So membership is an advisory role. And so this is a great way for us to engage with the public and get your feedback and advice on what you think we should work on. And so would love your involvement. I would say we're still very much figuring out some of the details in terms of both the responsibilities associated with membership and the benefits, but would love to take you on that journey with us and have you be part of the process. So please reach out to us if you'd like more information. We're happy to have your involvement, and we're really excited to be here today. And I think I will stop there and turn it back over to Colleen for questions.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Amy and Jamie and Ian and Steve. That was a great overview. I'm sure you guys could probably go for another hour, and I would love that, but we'll keep it short for everybody on a Friday. All right, we have some questions. I know Amy and Christina looks like is answering in the chat as well to Andy's questions about the financial relationship and the governance structure, and then how a new farm joins. Andy, did you feel like your question was answered, or do you want to maybe ask an additional question?
This is Amy too. I can jump in a little bit more on the specifics on the finances. A lot of the farms that are getting involved in the project, you know, there might be debt on the farm, and there's almost always a purchase price. It is wonderful. If anybody wants to donate farmland, please raise your hand and contact us. But typically there's a purchase price, and there has been a large amount of initial fundraising from philanthropic sources, and that is the primary source. And Ian can speak more or correct me if I'm getting any of this wrong, but that's the primary source of purchase funds at this time. So Agrarian Trust is providing those funds, but the Agrarian Commons becomes the owner. I just wanted to add that detail.
Great, thank you, Amy. Let's see, there are a few more questions in here. Becky from,
Colleen, actually, this is Erin, sorry. Ian, could you stop sharing your screen? Would you mind doing that so we can see each other for the discussion?
Yeah, sure.
That'd be great. Okay, yay. All right.
Yeah, Becky from Littleton Food Co-op, she was asking about maybe considering educational events, virtual or hybrid, to educate the community in the North Country. Any thoughts on that there?
Yeah, happy to do that. So let's follow up, and especially in these virtual times, it becomes quite easy to plug in for an hour, and yeah.
Great. So and that's a good note. We'll share, you know, Ian and Jamie and Amy's contact information, so we can make sure if anyone has any additional questions after, they can follow up. Let's see here.
And just to add to that, as the secretary for the New Hampshire Agrarian Commons, I'm happy to field questions and also help with coordinating events. And, you know, I think part of the reason why we really wanted to be here today is because that's one of our goals for the next 6 months, is to start to spread the word about what we're doing. Over the past year, we've been really focused on getting our organizational infrastructure in place and forming our bylaws and articles of incorporation and kind of all the behind the scenes stuff that goes into creating a new organization. But I would say over the course of the coming months and year, we really want to partner with others and spread the word and get more folks involved. So definitely happy to coordinate that and help be a main point of contact and bottom line that for our team.
Great, thank you, Jamie. Liz had a question. As commons leaseholders retire, phase out of farming, how are stewardship transitions handled? And then follow up, are there any considerations for aging in place, etc.?
Yeah, so I'll answer that in the broader sense. So, you know, I shared some on the New Hampshire Commons. All of those farms are kind of mid-career farms as described, but across the Commons, really a lot of our goal in kind of who we worked with, where we worked with, and the projects we took on was to showcase different kind of diversity of projects. So we have some that are retiring, exiting farmers. We have some that are kind of farmland that's not in use, needing new farmers. So there's kind of different ages of landowner transition and farm business transition to address. So part of that, I'd encourage you to go to the Agrarian Commons website, and right on the homepage on the bottom half, it shares some illustrations on equity and how kind of financial equity and the sharing of kind of capital investments is addressed in the lease, and the lease documents would address that in legal language, but the illustrations do a good job of capturing more than I could describe now. But part of it is that the leaseholder owns their investments and they own the term of this lease. So they are trading, holding title to property or holding an unsecured use of property for this long-term lease tenure and ownership of their business assets and other investments. And at the end of their business, they're selling those subject to the terms of the lease. So the new leaseholder is bound by the same lease, similar terms, to uphold kind of the mission of the Commons and Agrarian Trust, but the farmer is able to transfer those as they would a farm business normally. They just don't have title to the real estate in this model to transfer that, which many don't already when they transfer farm businesses. So that's part of it. Your other part of the question was, yes, in some projects we're working with, there's retiring or already retired farmers where there's a life estate being retained to house and the yard, kind of a defined X acres around the house. And the whole property is transferring into the Commons. The Commons then is finding a new leaseholder for everything but that life estate area. And the exiting farm family is keeping that life estate for that generation's life or some defined term of years in a term estate. So there's that ability to kind of age in place for some, if the farm allows for that, like it allows enough housing for an exiting landowner to leave and a new farmer to come in and have enough housing and infrastructure to make it work. But where it can, we have projects that are practicing that.
And I just wanted to speak to the lease language a little bit, which is in that link that went on the chat. The toolkit has the whole entire equitable lease template. And so if you look at that, you'll see that the lease is assignable, but only with the written permission of the landlord. And so the landlord in this model is the Commons. And we landed in that spot because essentially we wanted to trigger the farmer and the Commons working together. So now we're going to think about like, okay, what investments has the farmer put in? What is the value of that? What is the farmer going to be paid out to, sell the lease interest at that point? Cashing out on the equity of the lease, essentially. So that's all, as Ian said, it's all spelled out in the lease, but the important point is that it triggers a conversation and a negotiation between the parties, and then the lease can be transferred to the new farmer.
Great. Thank you, Amy and Ian, for answering that. Ed had some questions. I think he wanted to just speak up and ask them himself. So by all means, Ed.
Okay, thank you. Let me see if I can. Okay, here we are. I'm involved with a group of investors in agricultural operations, and the one I'm involved with is in a Warsaw Pact country, Romania. And the mission is to develop a generational economy for persecuted and disadvantaged communities. That's the Romas. Romas are gypsies. So my question on that regard, knowing what that is we're looking at bringing that, and we do it all over the world in very, very poor cultures. And we're looking to bring that model to the US, into some like persistent poverty counties, that type of thing that are defined by the USDA. So my question with that background, my question on that regard is, do you all think there'll be some synergy with what we do and with what you do, what the Agrarian Trust and the Agrarian Commons does. I've went through the website. It's very good, by the way. And if so, then I'd like to have a conversation or open up a dialogue offline at some point. That's my first question.
Yeah, happy to have that conversation. And really, so within the Agrarian Commons model, embedded in the bylaws and the structure itself, it speaks to how debt is allowed on the land, and what we feel, and this kind of gets at another question that's out there, is that we feel that the value of farmland is out of sync with what regenerative farming can afford. And we're seeing that in the loss of farms and the financial precarious nature of farm businesses that is all around us. So we don't see the Agrarian Commons as a charity model for farms per se. We see the Agrarian Commons model as a charity or philanthropic model to realign the values of farmland. So it is primarily philanthropic capital used to decommodify the farmland and then convey out lease tenure to farmers. Within that philanthropic piece of farm acquisition, farm ownership, back to your question, the bylaws allow up to 20% of the property value to be used to encumber mortgage-backed debt. So there is an investment component for farm acquisition. There is also then investment components for some of those investment in the property aspects that I touched upon, whether it's regenerating ecosystem or soil health, the renewable energy, or farm infrastructure needs. So there's different points of collaboration with investment capital. Overall, though, we feel, and the data proves out, that the cost per acre of farmland is above what farmers can afford, and thus we need to address that in some way. Our solution is through this nonprofit philanthropic model for that. But happy to talk further.
I'll send you my email in the chat, okay?
Great.
Second question I have is that, Steve mentioned earlier about the model that Native Americans and indigenous cultures use regarding the land. What we did, we being my wife and I, is, we didn't know any better. We modeled our farmland after the Western European model, in that we own the land. However, the difference is we also farm it. We're livestock farmers. We're beef cattle. And so with that said, and we're in North Sutton and New London. Particularly New London it's stunning how much land goes for. Our objective is to, I'm on the other side of 65, and we're looking to leave our farm permanently in agriculture. I've talked to, and with that permanently in agriculture. I've worked with my local land trust, which is the Osborne Sargent Land Trust, and they are not keen at all about agriculture for many different reasons. Land conservation, the standard template, yes, but not ag. And there's no grazing lands up here except for what we own. So my thing is, we want to do it. We'd like to ensure agriculture, but I'll tell you, we also need to monetize it. And we are very willing and able to take less than certainly a lot less than market value. So that's where we're at. We want to monetize, and we want it in agriculture. And from what I read, it seemed, I was confused about the trust. I didn't know if the trust worked in that way, but is that something that, the Agrarian Trust would want to work with me on?
Yeah, happy to explore it. As let's carry this forward offline, but just to respond kind of in brief and a broader picture, as Amy described, like most of the farm projects are acquisitions of some type. So working out something that's going to be viable for all parties would be step number one to see if we could get to. But then really, yes, much of what the model itself, owning the title to land in a commons and conveying a lease to farmer, allows for is that conservation easements are an important tool to protect natural resources, and that's great work that conservation land trusts do. And in this model, most of the farms we're working with, all in New Hampshire, have conservation easements on them. Others we're working with, conservation easements are going on them as we acquire them. So it allows for protection of resources through conservation easements, but it also recognizes that conservation easements are a permanent tool intended to be unchangeable, except for a few exceptions and paths forward. And that's really to create permanent, perpetual protection in the ways intended. Agriculture is dynamic, right? People are dynamic. So the uses of sort of a vision and goal of keeping land in agriculture in perpetuity, like that can be a goal, but to define the specifics of that becomes problematic because we have to adapt. Agriculture in New Hampshire in 1980 looked different than it does today, but active agriculture is still, carried forward. So what a lease document does is a lease allows for adaptability in the way a conservation easement doesn't. And what the bylaws and the model themselves do is require active agriculture. So that's why that is the purpose for this whole model. Holding land is active stewardship and active agriculture. And the lease is how that is prescribed and then monitored.
Thank you very much. That was very clear. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Ed, and thank you, Ian, for those great answers. We got two questions that are seemingly similar, kind of talking about the donation philanthropic model of agrarian commons and agrarian trust. One kind of question is, what is a response to what does it say? Folks who say agrarian trust is just a donation model, not a working land strategy or lands financing strategy. And then if there are any other financing ideas that are being pursued currently.
Yeah, so kind of I touched on this before, but really, the farms that are operating are holding a lease tenure and then operating subject to lease, but independently on the ground. And those farms range in legal structure, and that was intentional kind of for the goal of diversity in the model that I described earlier. But so some of the farms are nonprofit farms, some are governmental run, others are private for-profit businesses. There's a cooperative farm as well. So they run the range of legal structures, but the model itself does not require or prescribe any type of farm structure, and really feel that farms as a business need to be able to sustain themselves. And certain types of farming activity might lend itself to nonprofit or for-profit, but that is independent in many ways of the model. What we feel this model is focused on is land and how we value land, and the fact that we value farmland for development, speculation, and extraction. And farmland values continue to increase year over year based on those financial values and relationship to farmland. And it's really decoupled from a farm business's ability to service that debt or afford that land to begin with. And it's getting more and more financially impossible for farmers to afford land. So, their business needs to operate independently and cover the leasehold cost and manage the farm. But really, we feel there is a need for charity and nonprofit structure within land ownership for agriculture, in the same way that we in the Northeast for 100 years have felt that nonprofit And charity work is important for land for natural resource protection and viewshed protection and open space and habitat. We would argue that it is critically important for active agricultural land producing our food to be treated in the same way.
Great, thank you, Ian. I think this will probably be our last question from Adam here, as we're going to wrap up in a couple minutes. Adam is asking, are there any broader policy actions, local, state, regional, or federal, that the trust sees as also holding potential to help achieve this objective of decommodifying farmland and correcting the imbalance between land values and the economics of regenerative farming? It's a great question, Adam. That's a mouthful.
Yeah, I'd quickly answer that. So to explain a little bit more on our funding is right. All of the funding for acquisition is philanthropic capital, and it's all private capital. There's no federal or state level funding for farmland acquisition. There's funding for conservation easement of farmland. There's funding for farm practices on the ground and farm infrastructure needs, but there's not presently funding for fee acquisition, the ownership of farmland. There have been state level bills put forward in Vermont and California. Neither have passed, but that has been the efforts. There has been discussion in some Green New Deal platforms put forward for community held farmland. And there's also been discussion in the pandemic of the need for community land trusts to hold equity in communities. But presently there's no funding allocated for ownership of land, and that is what's needed.
Awesome, thank you, Ian. All right, any last final quick questions? We can get them in the next couple minutes. Otherwise, we're gonna have to wrap up here. Thank you so much to Jamie and Ian and Amy and all the Agrarian Commons folks, Steve as well, for sharing his stories and his thoughts with us. Just a reminder from the Food Alliance end, we are taking a little summer break from our network cafes. July and August, we're giving you guys those months off, and we'll return in September with a very fun and exciting topic. So stay tuned for that. Last things, Ian, Jamie, Amy, if you want to chime in.
No, I just want to say thank you, Colleen, for hosting us and for inviting us to participate. And it's just been a pleasure. And we look forward to staying in touch with your team.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. And we'll be following up with a recording of the session, summary, and some resources that Jamie and Ian and the team will have available for you guys. So everyone, enjoy your Friday, enjoy your weekend. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for being here, everybody.
you.